The morning sun cast golden rays across the grand courtyard of Buckingham Palace, as thousands of tourists gathered behind the iron gates. Among them stood the Morrison family from Manchester, excited to witness the famous changing of the guard ceremony. 8-year-old Emma Morrison clutched her father's hand tightly, her blue eyes wide with wonder as she took in the magnificent palace before her. Emma had been looking forward to this trip for months. Her parents had promised her a special birthday treat, and visiting London's most iconic landmark was a dream come true. She wore her favorite red jacket and had brought along a small notebook to sketch the guards in their tall bearskin hats. Her older brother Jack stood beside her with his phone raised, ready to capture every moment. The ceremony began with the usual pomp and precision. The guards marched in perfect formation, their red tunics gleaming under the morning light. The crowd pressed forward, cameras clicking and children squealing with delight. Emma watched, mesmerized by the discipline and tradition unfolding before her eyes. But something caught her attention that others seemed to miss. One of the guards, standing at his post near the palace entrance, appeared different somehow. While his posture remained rigid and his expression stoic, Emma noticed his eyes. They were darting back and forth, scanning the crowd with an intensity that seemed unusual. His jaw was clenched tighter than the other guards, and tiny beads of sweat formed on his forehead despite the cool morning air. Emma had always been an observant child. Her teachers often commented on how she noticed details that escaped others. She remembered reading in her school library about body language and how people communicate without words. Something about this guard's demeanor troubled her young mind. As the ceremony continued, Emma's attention remained fixed on the guard. She noticed his breathing seemed labored, his chest rising and falling more rapidly than it should. His knuckles were white as he gripped his rifle, and every few seconds his left eye would twitch slightly. Nobody else in the massive crowd seemed to notice these subtle signs. The little girl tugged on her father's sleeve. "Dad, I think something's wrong with that guard," she whispered, pointing toward the man. Her father glanced briefly in the direction she indicated. "He looks fine, sweetheart. They're trained to stand very still. That's their job." Emma frowned, unconvinced. She had a feeling deep in her stomach that something was seriously wrong. The guard's face had grown paler, and now she could see his legs trembling ever so slightly beneath his uniform. Her heart began to race as she realized what might be happening. During a school assembly months earlier, a paramedic had visited to teach the children about medical emergencies. Emma remembered the presentation vividly. The paramedic had explained the signs of various health crises, including heat stroke, dehydration, and something that had particularly stuck in her memory because of how serious it sounded. The symptoms the guard was displaying matched what she had learned. Emma made a decision. She couldn't just stand there and watch if someone needed help. But how could she alert anyone without causing a massive panic among the thousands of tourists? She couldn't simply shout out. That would create chaos and might even prevent proper help from arriving quickly. Then she remembered something else from that school assembly. The paramedic had taught them about silent signals, ways to communicate distress without words. He had shown them gestures used by security personnel and emergency responders. One particular signal was designed for situations where speaking out loud might be dangerous or inappropriate. Emma's hands moved almost instinctively. She raised her hand with her palm facing outward, then tucked her thumb inward and folded her fingers over it, creating a specific gesture. She held it up high, her arm fully extended, making sure it was visible above the crowd. Her heart pounded as she maintained the signal, hoping someone who understood would see it. For what felt like an eternity, nothing happened. The ceremony continued, the music played, and tourists chattered excitedly around her. Emma kept her hand raised, her arm beginning to ache from the effort. She wanted to cry but forced herself to stay calm and focused. Then, suddenly, everything changed. Another guard, positioned near the palace doors, caught sight of Emma's signal. His eyes widened almost imperceptibly. Without breaking his formal stance, he made a subtle movement with his hand, a gesture so small that only trained eyes would notice. Within seconds, a ripple of silent communication spread among the guards. The guard who had been showing signs of distress was now visibly swaying on his feet. His rifle dipped slightly and his eyes began to lose focus. It was clear to anyone looking closely that he was seconds away from collapse. But thanks to Emma's quick thinking and brave action, help was already on the way. 3 palace officials in plain clothes emerged swiftly from a side entrance. moving with practiced efficiency through the crowd. They were followed by two medics carrying a discreet medical kit. The tourists around Emma barely noticed the commotion, their attention still fixed on the ceremonial guards in the courtyard. The officials reached the struggling guard just as his knees began to buckle. They caught him smoothly, making it appear as though it was part of a planned rotation. The medics immediately began assessment, checking his pulse and pupils while shielding him from the view of most onlookers with their bodies. Emma watched with bated breath as the emergency responders worked. She saw them place an oxygen mask on the guard's face and heard one of them speaking urgently into a radio. An ambulance, which had been discreetly stationed nearby, rolled up to a private entrance of the palace. A senior palace official, a woman with kind eyes and graying hair, approached Emma and her family. She knelt down to Emma's eye level, a warm smile on her face despite the seriousness of the situation. "Young lady," she said softly, "you may have just saved that guard's life. Where did you learn that signal?" Emma's voice was small but steady. "A paramedic came to our school. He taught us about emergencies and how to signal for help without making noise." The official's expression showed genuine admiration. "That was remarkably brave and intelligent. Most adults wouldn't have noticed what you saw, and even fewer would have known how to respond appropriately." Emma's parents stood in stunned silence, only now realizing what their daughter had done. Her mother's hand flew to her mouth, tears forming in her eyes. Her father squeezed Emma's shoulder with pride and relief. The ceremony had continued without interruption for the tourists, but behind the scenes, Emma's action had set in motion a critical rescue operation. The guard was quickly transported to a nearby hospital, where doctors would later confirm that he had been suffering from a severe medical episode that could have been fatal without immediate intervention. As the Morrison family prepared to continue their tour, the palace official handed Emma a special card with an embossed royal seal. "Someone will be in touch with your family very soon," she said with a mysterious smile. "What you did today will not be forgotten." 3 days after the incident at Buckingham Palace, life had returned to normal for the Morrison family. They had completed their London vacation and returned to their modest home in Manchester. Emma went back to school, where she told a few close friends about her adventure, though she kept the most dramatic details to herself. Something about the experience felt too personal, too significant to share casually with everyone. The guard whose life she had helped save was named Christopher Walsh, a 28-year-old man who had served in the Queen's Guard for 6 years. Christopher lay in his hospital bed, recovering from what doctors had diagnosed as a severe cardiac episode, triggered by an underlying condition he never knew he had. The combination of standing in the heat while wearing the heavy ceremonial uniform, along with the undiagnosed heart condition, had created a life-threatening situation. When Christopher regained full consciousness and learned what had happened, he was overwhelmed with gratitude and disbelief. A palace official sat beside his bed and recounted the story of how a young girl had noticed his distress, when thousands of adults had walked past without seeing anything wrong. The official showed him security footage of Emma making the distress signal, her small hand raised determinedly above the crowd. Tears streamed down Christopher's face as he watched the footage. "She's just a child," he whispered, his voice hoarse with emotion. "How did she know? How did she have the courage to do that?" The official explained what they had learned about the paramedic school visit and how Emma had paid close attention to the safety lesson. Christopher made an immediate decision. "I need to thank her properly. I need to meet her family." Meanwhile, in Manchester, Emma received an unexpected phone call at home. Her mother answered, her expression shifting from casual to shocked as she listened to the voice on the other end. When she hung up, her hands were trembling. "Emma, sweetheart, come here, please," her mother called out. Emma ran down the stairs, curious about her mother's strange tone. Her brother Jack appeared from his room, sensing something important was happening. "That was Buckingham Palace," her mother said slowly, still processing the information herself. "They want to invite our entire family back to London. They want to honor Emma for what she did." Emma's eyes widened. "Really? But I just did what anyone should do." Her father, who had just arrived home from work, caught the tail end of the conversation. After hearing the full story, he sat down heavily on the couch. "Our little girl is going to be recognized by the palace. I can't believe this." Over the following week, the Morrison family received detailed instructions about their upcoming visit. They would be guests of honor at a private ceremony at the palace. Emma would receive a commendation for her bravery and quick thinking. More importantly, she would meet Christopher Walsh, the guard whose life she had helped save. The media had somehow caught wind of the story. Reporters began calling the Morrison home asking for interviews. The local Manchester newspaper wanted to run a feature story. Emma's school principal called to congratulate her and ask if she would be willing to share her experience with other students. Emma's parents, overwhelmed by the sudden attention, decided to limit media exposure until after the palace ceremony. They wanted to protect their daughter from being overwhelmed by the spotlight, while still allowing her to receive the recognition she deserved. On the morning of the ceremony, Emma dressed in a beautiful navy dress her mother had bought specially for the occasion. She felt nervous butterflies in her stomach as the family boarded the train to London. This time, their visit would be very different from their tourist excursion. When they arrived at Buckingham Palace, they were escorted through a private entrance, away from the tourist crowds. Emma held her mother's hand tightly as they walked through ornate corridors lined with paintings and historical artifacts. The palace was even more magnificent on the inside than she had imagined. They were led to an elegant reception room where several palace officials waited to greet them. Among them stood Christopher Walsh, now recovered and wearing his dress uniform. The moment he saw Emma, his eyes filled with tears. He knelt down to her level, just as the palace official had done days earlier. "Emma," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I owe you my life. The doctors told me that if I had collapsed without immediate medical attention, I might not have survived. You saw what others missed. You acted when others didn't. You are the bravest person I have ever met." Emma, usually shy around strangers, felt an instant connection to this man, whose life had intersected with hers in such a dramatic way. "I was scared," she admitted quietly. "But I remembered what the paramedic taught us. He said that sometimes being brave means doing the right thing even when you're afraid." Christopher smiled through his tears. "That paramedic was absolutely right. You did the right thing and you did it perfectly." A senior palace official stepped forward carrying a velvet box. "Emma Morrison, on behalf of Buckingham Palace and the royal household, we would like to present you with the Royal Humane Society's Certificate of Commendation. This honor is given to individuals who have demonstrated exceptional courage and quick thinking in saving or attempting to save a life." Emma's hands trembled as she accepted the certificate. It was beautifully crafted with gold lettering and an official seal. Her parents stood behind her, both wiping away tears of pride. But the ceremony wasn't finished. The palace official continued, "Additionally, we would like to announce that Emma's actions have inspired a new initiative. We will be working with schools across the United Kingdom to implement comprehensive emergency awareness programs, teaching children the same kinds of life-saving signals and recognition techniques that Emma used so effectively." The room erupted in applause. Emma's cheeks flushed with a mixture of embarrassment and pride. She hadn't expected her actions to have such far-reaching consequences. Christopher spoke again, addressing everyone in the room. "I've had time to think about what happened, and I've realized something important. Emma didn't just save my life that day. She reminded all of us about the power of awareness, the importance of education, and the incredible impact that one person, regardless of age, can have when they choose to act." After the formal ceremony, the Morrison family was given a private tour of areas of the palace normally closed to the public. Emma was fascinated by everything she saw, but what touched her most was the genuine warmth and gratitude expressed by everyone she met. Palace staff, guards, and officials all thanked her personally. During lunch in a private dining room, Christopher shared more about his experience. "Standing in that position, feeling myself getting weaker was terrifying. I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't break protocol. I couldn't call out for help. I was trapped by duty and tradition, and I was scared." He looked at Emma with profound respect. Then the other guards started moving, and I knew someone had seen. Someone had understood. I learned later it was you. An 8-year-old girl saw what trained adults missed. That's extraordinary. Emma listened thoughtfully, then said something that surprised everyone. "My teacher always says we should look after each other. She says that's what makes us human. I was just looking after someone who needed help." Her simple words captured the essence of heroism in a way that no grand speech could. Christopher reached across the table and gently squeezed her hand. "Thank you, Emma. Thank you for looking after me." As the day drew to a close, the Morrison family prepared to return home. They had been given gifts, taken countless photographs, and created memories that would last a lifetime. But the most precious gift was the friendship that had formed between Emma and Christopher. Before they left, Christopher knelt beside Emma one final time. "I want you to know something important. What you did doesn't just matter because you helped me. It matters because you showed everyone that paying attention matters, that education matters, and that even the smallest voice can make the biggest difference." Emma hugged him tightly. "Will I see you again?" she asked. Christopher smiled. "Absolutely. I've already spoken with your parents. I'd like to visit your school when the new safety program launches. I want to tell all the students what their classmate did and why it matters." As the Morrison family rode the train back to Manchester that evening, Emma sat quietly, looking out the window at the darkening landscape. Her certificate was carefully stored in her backpack, but the real treasure was the knowledge that her actions had mattered. She had made a difference in the world, and at just 8 years old she had learned a lesson that many adults never fully understand. Sometimes the most heroic thing you can do is simply pay attention and care enough to act. 2 months had passed since Emma's recognition at Buckingham Palace, and her life had transformed in unexpected ways. The local Manchester community had embraced her story with overwhelming support. Her school, Riverside Primary, had become a focal point for the new National Safety Awareness Program that Palace officials had promised to implement. The morning started like any other Wednesday, with Emma arriving at school alongside her best friend Sophie Chen. But today was different. Today marked the official launch of the Safety Guardians program, an initiative directly inspired by Emma's actions. The school assembly hall buzzed with excitement as students filed in, whispering about the special guests who would be attending. Emma sat in the front row, fidgeting with the hem of her school uniform. Despite all the attention she had received, she still felt nervous speaking in front of large groups. Her teacher, Mrs. Patterson, had been incredibly supportive, helping Emma prepare for today's presentation without putting too much pressure on the young girl. The headmaster, Mr. Davies, stepped onto the stage and raised his hand for silence. "Good morning, students. Today is a very special day for Riverside Primary and for schools across the United Kingdom. We are launching an important program that could save lives, and it all started because one of our own students knew exactly what to do in an emergency." The students erupted in applause, many turning to smile at Emma. Her cheeks reddened, but she managed a shy wave. Mr. Davies continued, "We have several distinguished guests with us today. First, I'd like to introduce Christopher Walsh, the Buckingham Palace guard whose life was saved by our very own Emma Morrison." Christopher walked onto the stage in his formal guard uniform, looking strong and healthy. The students gasped with awe at seeing a real palace guard up close. He smiled warmly at the crowd and then looked directly at Emma, giving her an encouraging nod. "Next," Mr. Davies announced, "we have Martin Cooper, the paramedic who visited our school last year and taught the safety awareness session that Emma attended." A man in his 40s with kind eyes and graying temples walked onto the stage. Martin Cooper had been absolutely astonished when he learned that a student from one of his school visits had used his teachings to save a life. He had driven from his station in Leeds specifically for this assembly. Finally, Mr. Davies introduced representatives from the Royal Humane Society and the Department of Education, all present to witness the launch of the program that would eventually reach hundreds of schools across the country. Emma was invited onto the stage. Her legs felt wobbly as she climbed the steps, but when she reached the top and saw the encouraging faces of Christopher and Martin, her confidence grew. Christopher placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Martin Cooper spoke first, addressing the assembly with the same engaging manner that had captured Emma's attention months earlier. "When I visit schools to teach safety awareness, I always hope that students will remember what they learn. But I never imagined that a single lesson could have such a powerful impact. Emma didn't just remember what I taught. She understood it deeply enough to recognize an emergency that most adults would have missed." He turned to face Emma. "You paid attention when others might have been daydreaming. You remembered details when others might have forgotten. And most importantly, you had the courage to act when others might have stayed silent. You are a model for every student here and across the country." Christopher then shared his perspective with the students. He described what it felt like to stand at his post, feeling his body failing him, unable to call for help because of his duty and training. His voice cracked with emotion as he recounted the moment he realized help was coming, all because a little girl had noticed and cared enough to do something about it. The doctors told me that Emma's quick action gave them the extra minutes they needed to prevent permanent damage to my heart. Those minutes were the difference between life and death, between me standing here today or my family planning a funeral. That's how important what Emma did was. That's how important all of you can be if you learn and remember what you're taught today. The assembly hall was completely silent. Even the youngest students understood the gravity of what they were hearing. Emma felt tears prickling her eyes as she listened to Christopher speak. She hadn't fully understood until this moment just how close he had come to dying that day. Then it was Emma's turn to speak. Mrs. Patterson had helped her prepare some remarks, but standing before hundreds of her peers, Emma decided to speak from her heart instead. "I was really scared that day," she began, her voice small but growing stronger with each word. "I wasn't sure if anyone would understand my signal. I wasn't sure if I was even right about what I was seeing. But Mr. Cooper had taught us that it's better to ask for help and be wrong than to stay quiet and let something bad happen." She looked out at the sea of young faces watching her intently. "I'm not special. I'm just a regular kid like all of you. But I paid attention in assembly, and I cared about what happened to that guard even though I didn't know him. That's all it takes to be a hero. Paying attention and caring about other people." The applause that followed was thunderous. Students jumped to their feet, cheering for their classmate who had proven that age doesn't determine impact. Emma's parents, watching from the side of the hall, held each other and cried tears of pride. After the assembly, the real work of the program launch began. Martin Cooper, along with other certified trainers, conducted hands-on sessions with each class. They taught the students various emergency signals, how to recognize signs of distress in others, and the importance of staying calm during emergencies. They covered situations ranging from medical emergencies to safety concerns, giving children tools to protect themselves and others. Emma participated in her class's session, but she was surprised to find herself in a new role. Martin asked her to demonstrate the distress signal she had used at the palace, explaining to the other students exactly when and how to use it. Emma showed them the gesture, holding her palm outward with her thumb tucked inside and fingers closed over it, creating the universal silent signal for help. This signal is recognized by security personnel, law enforcement, and emergency responders, Martin explained. It was originally designed for people who couldn't speak out for help, like hostages or people in danger. But it's also perfect for situations like Emma faced, where shouting would cause panic, but help is still urgently needed. Sophie raised her hand. "What if we use the signal but no one sees it?" Martin nodded approvingly at the question. "That's why we're teaching everyone to recognize it. The more people who know what this signal means, the more effective it becomes. You're not just learning to ask for help, you're learning to recognize when others need help too." During lunch break, Emma found herself surrounded by classmates asking questions and wanting to hear more details about her experience. Usually shy about attention, Emma discovered that sharing her story felt important. Each student who listened might remember something that could help someone else someday. One boy named Thomas approached her hesitantly. "I have asthma," he said quietly. "Sometimes I get scared that I'll have an attack and no one will notice. But now I know I can use that signal if I can't breathe well enough to talk." Emma felt a surge of understanding. Her experience was rippling outward, giving other children confidence and tools they needed to stay safe. "You can also teach your friends what to look for," she suggested. "That way they can help you if you need it." Thomas smiled with relief, and Emma realized that heroism wasn't just about one dramatic moment. It was about creating a culture where people looked out for each other, where everyone felt empowered to help. As the school day ended, Christopher waited by the front entrance to say goodbye to Emma and her family. He had spent the entire day at the school, visiting different classes and sharing his story with students of all ages. "Today was incredible," he told Emma's parents. "Watching these children learn and engage with the safety training, knowing it all started because Emma paid attention in an assembly, just like the ones I attended today. It's overwhelming in the best way." He knelt down to Emma's level one more time. "You know what the best part of today was? Watching you teach others. You're not just someone who did something brave once. You're someone who's helping create a whole generation of young people who know how to look after each other. That's even more heroic than what you did at the palace." Emma hugged him tightly. "Will the program really go to lots of schools?" Christopher nodded. "Hundreds of schools, Emma, maybe eventually all of them. And every single student who learns these skills will have you to thank for it. Your one act of courage is going to protect countless people." As Emma walked home with her family that afternoon, she felt different somehow. Not better than others, but more aware of her place in a connected world where everyone's actions mattered. She thought about all the students who had learned the safety signals today, and about all the other schools where the program would eventually launch. Somewhere out there, maybe next week or next month or next year, another child would notice something wrong. They would remember their training, signal for help, and potentially save a life, and it would all trace back to a sunny morning at Buckingham Palace when one little girl decided that staying silent wasn't an option. 6 months after the Buckingham Palace incident, Emma's life had found a new rhythm. The initial media frenzy had calmed, and while she was still occasionally recognized in public, the constant attention had faded to a more comfortable level. She had returned to being a regular student at Riverside Primary, though her teachers noticed a newfound confidence in her that hadn't been there before. The Safety Guardians program was now operating in over 300 schools across England, Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland. Emma received letters from teachers and students sharing stories about how the training had already made a difference. One letter particularly touched her heart. It came from a school in Edinburgh written by a 10-year-old boy named Callum. He described how he had used the distress signal when he witnessed his grandfather having a stroke at a family gathering. An off-duty nurse at the event had seen the signal and immediately called for emergency services. The doctors said the quick response had saved his grandfather's life and prevented serious brain damage. Callum's letter ended with words that Emma would treasure forever. "You helped save my grandpa, and you don't even know him. But because you taught everyone about the signal, I knew what to do. Thank you for being brave at the palace. It made me brave too." Emma's mother found her daughter sitting on her bed reading the letter for the 3rd time with tears streaming down her face. "Sweetheart, what's wrong?" she asked, concerned. "Nothing's wrong, Mum," Emma said, wiping her eyes. "I just never thought about it like that. When I made that signal at the palace, I was just trying to help one person. But now it's helping lots of people I'll never meet." Her mother sat beside her and wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "That's the beautiful thing about doing good in the world, Emma. It spreads like ripples in a pond. You threw one stone, and the ripples are still reaching new shores." Meanwhile, Christopher Walsh had become an advocate for expanded emergency training for palace guards and other ceremonial positions. His medical scare had revealed a gap in protocols that he was determined to close. He worked with palace officials to implement new policies that would allow guards to signal distress without breaking their formal stance, and to ensure regular health screenings for all personnel in physically demanding ceremonial roles. Christopher had also maintained regular contact with the Morrison family. He called Emma once a month, and they had become genuine friends despite their age difference. He often shared updates about his advocacy work, and Emma always listened with interest, asking thoughtful questions that surprised him with their maturity. During one of their phone calls, Christopher shared exciting news. "Emma, I've been invited to speak at a conference on public safety in Brussels. They want me to present about the incident and how your quick thinking led to systemic changes. Would you and your parents be willing to join me? They'd like to hear from you as well." Emma's heart raced with excitement and nervousness. Brussels was in Belgium, a different country entirely. She had never traveled outside the United Kingdom before. "Really, they want to hear from me. Emma, you're the heart of this story. Your perspective is invaluable. And honestly, I think it would be powerful for security professionals from across Europe to hear directly from the person who saw what they were trained to see but missed." After discussing it with her parents and getting permission from her school, Emma agreed to attend the conference. The following month, the Morrison family flew to Brussels with Christopher. Emma pressed her face against the airplane window during takeoff, marveling at how small everything looked from above. The conference was held in a grand convention center filled with security professionals, emergency responders, law enforcement officers, and public safety officials from 20 different countries. Emma felt incredibly small in the vast space, surrounded by adults in formal attire speaking languages she didn't understand. But when Christopher took the stage and began telling their story, Emma watched the audience's faces transform. These hardened professionals, people who had seen emergencies and crises throughout their careers, were moved to tears by the tale of an 8-year-old girl who had noticed what they might have missed. When it was Emma's turn to speak, Christopher helped her onto the stage and adjusted the microphone to her height. She looked out at hundreds of faces and felt her courage waver. Then she spotted her parents in the third row giving her encouraging smiles, and she remembered why she was here. "Hello," she began, her voice echoing through the large hall. "My name is Emma Morrison, and I'm 9 years old now. When I helped Mr. Walsh at Buckingham Palace, I wasn't trying to be a hero. I was just paying attention." She went on to describe what she had observed that day, explaining in simple terms how she had noticed the subtle signs of distress. As she spoke, people in the audience began taking notes. These were professionals who made careers out of observation and threat assessment, yet they were learning from a child's perspective. "I think sometimes grown-ups make things too complicated," Emma said, speaking with the honest directness that only children can manage. "You don't need special training to care about other people. You just need to look at them, really look, and ask yourself if they're okay." That's what I did. I looked at Mr. Walsh and asked myself if he was okay. And he wasn't. The audience sat in profound silence, absorbing her words. A security director from France raised his hand. "Emma, were you afraid when you raised the signal? Afraid that you might be wrong and look foolish in front of thousands of people?" Emma thought carefully before answering. "Yes, I was afraid. But Mr. Cooper, the paramedic who taught us, said something important. He said it's better to be wrong and look silly than to be right and do nothing. If I was wrong and the guard was fine, nothing bad would happen. But if I was right and I stayed quiet, someone could die. That made the choice easy." Her answer sparked a lengthy discussion among the professionals about the psychology of bystander intervention and why people often fail to act during emergencies, even when they suspect something is wrong. Emma's childlike logic had cut through years of psychological research and complicated theories to identify a simple truth. Caring about others outweighs personal embarrassment. After the formal presentations, Emma was surrounded by attendees wanting to thank her and ask questions. A German police officer told her about implementing similar training in Berlin schools. A Spanish emergency responder asked if he could translate her story for training materials. An Italian security consultant requested permission to use her experience as a case study in professional development courses. Emma answered each person patiently, though she felt overwhelmed by the attention. Christopher stayed close by her side, stepping in when he sensed she needed a break. During one such break, they stood together by the refreshment table, watching the conference attendees network and discuss the day's presentations. "You know what's amazing?" Christopher said, pouring Emma a glass of juice. "These people have decades of experience between them. They've trained for years, attended countless conferences, studied thousands of scenarios, but today you taught them something they didn't know." Emma sipped her juice thoughtfully. "I don't think I taught them something new. I think I reminded them of something they forgot. Everyone knows how to notice when something's wrong. Little kids do it all the time. We haven't learned yet to ignore our instincts or to convince ourselves that someone else will handle it." Christopher stared at her with amazement. "Emma, you're absolutely right. We train people to observe, but somewhere in that training, we forget to trust our basic human instinct to care. You didn't overthink it. You saw you cared and you acted. It's beautifully simple." That evening, the Morrison family explored Brussels together. They visited the Grand Place with its stunning medieval architecture, ate Belgian waffles topped with strawberries and chocolate, and laughed together as they attempted to speak French to shopkeepers. Emma felt happy and normal again, just a kid on vacation with her family. But as they walked back to their hotel, Emma noticed something that made her stop in her tracks. An elderly woman was sitting on a bench, her face pale and her breathing labored. People walked past her, absorbed in their own concerns, and nobody seemed to notice her distress. Without hesitation, Emma approached the woman. "Excuse me, are you all right?" she asked in English, hoping the woman would understand. The woman looked at Emma with grateful eyes and spoke in accented English. "I feel dizzy. My chest hurts." Emma immediately turned to her father. "Dad, call an ambulance. I think she's having a heart problem." Her father quickly dialed emergency services while Emma stayed with the woman, holding her hand and speaking soothingly to keep her calm. Christopher, seeing what was happening, approached a nearby cafe and asked them to bring water and to help translate. Within minutes, Belgian emergency services arrived. The paramedics assessed the woman quickly and confirmed that she was indeed having a cardiac episode. They loaded her into the ambulance, but before they left, one of the paramedics approached Emma. "You called for help?" he asked in careful English. Emma nodded. She looked sick. "I thought she needed a doctor." The paramedic smiled warmly. "You very likely saved her life tonight. She's having a heart attack. A few more minutes and it might have been too late. Thank you for noticing. Thank you for caring." As the ambulance drove away, Emma stood on the Brussels street, suddenly aware that this was becoming a pattern in her life. She wasn't seeking out emergencies, but her heightened awareness meant she couldn't unsee them when they appeared. It was both a gift and a responsibility. Her mother hugged her tightly, tears streaming down her face. "Emma, sweetheart, you did it again. You saw what others missed." Christopher knelt beside her, his own eyes misty. "Do you understand now? This is who you are. Not because of one incident at a palace, but because you have a rare ability to see people, truly see them, and to care enough to act." Emma felt exhausted suddenly, the adrenaline of the moment draining away. "I just want people to be safe," she said quietly. "Why don't more people notice when someone needs help?" Her father picked her up, something he rarely did now that she was getting older. "Most people are too busy thinking about themselves, sweetheart. But you have something special. You think about others first. That's not something that can be taught. It's just who you are." As they walked back to the hotel, Emma was quiet, processing everything that had happened. The conference, the elderly woman, the paramedic's words, all of it swirled in her mind. She realized that saving Christopher at Buckingham Palace hadn't been a single moment of heroism. It had been the beginning of a journey that would define who she would become. Later that night, as Emma lay in her hotel bed, she could hear her parents talking quietly in the next room. They were discussing their daughter's future, wondering how to guide a child who had already made such an impact on the world. Emma smiled to herself in the darkness. She didn't have all the answers, but she knew one thing for certain. She would keep paying attention. She would keep caring. And whenever she saw someone who needed help, she would find a way to act. The next morning, before they left Brussels, the hotel manager approached the Morrison family in the lobby. "I heard about what your daughter did last night. The woman she helped, Mrs. Dubois, wanted me to give you this." He handed Emma a note written in shaky handwriting, translated into English. It read, "Thank you, little angel. You gave me more time with my grandchildren. May you always keep your beautiful heart." Emma folded the note carefully and placed it in her pocket, next to Callum's letter from Edinburgh. She was starting a collection of stories, each one a reminder of why paying attention mattered, why caring about strangers was never a waste of time. These letters weren't just thank you notes. They were proof that one person's awareness could create waves of positive change that reached further than anyone could predict. A year had passed since that fateful day at Buckingham Palace, and Emma was now a confident 10-year-old. The Safety Guardians program had expanded dramatically, now operating in over 800 schools across the United Kingdom and beginning to spread internationally. Emma had become the unofficial face of the program, though she still preferred to stay out of the spotlight as much as possible. Her life had settled into a new normal that balanced regular childhood activities with occasional speaking engagements and program visits. She played football with her friends, struggled with her maths homework, and spent hours reading adventure books in her favorite corner of the school library. But she also received weekly letters from people whose lives had been touched by the program, and she took time to respond to as many as she could. Christopher had become like an uncle to Emma. He visited the Morrison family regularly, and they had established a tradition of monthly video calls where they caught up on each other's lives. His health had fully recovered, and he had been promoted to a training position within the Palace Guard, where he now taught new recruits about emergency awareness and the importance of monitoring their own physical well-being. One autumn morning, Emma's teacher, Mrs. Patterson, asked her to stay after class. Emma worried briefly that she was in trouble, but Mrs. Patterson's warm smile quickly dispelled that concern. "Emma, I've received a letter from the Department of Education," Mrs. Patterson began, holding up an official-looking envelope. "They've created a new youth ambassador position for the Safety Guardians program, and they'd like to offer it to you." Emma's eyes widened. What would a youth ambassador do? Mrs. Patterson sat down beside her student. You would help train other young people to become peer educators in their schools. You'd work with program coordinators to improve the training materials based on what actually resonates with students. And you'd share your story at important events to keep people motivated and engaged. Emma felt a flutter of excitement mixed with nervousness. That sounds like a lot of responsibility. What if I'm not good enough? Mrs. Patterson laughed gently. Emma, you've already proven yourself more than capable, but I want you to think carefully about this. It would mean missing some school for travel, and it would require a significant time commitment. You need to be sure this is what you want. Emma thought about all the letters she had received, all the stories of people helping others because they had learned what she had learned. She thought about Callum's grandfather in Edinburgh and Mrs. Dubois in Brussels. She thought about how one paramedic school visit had equipped her to save a life, and how that single incident had created a movement that was saving many more lives. I want to do it, Emma said firmly. If I can help more people learn how to help each other, then it's worth it. That evening, Emma's family gathered around the dinner table to discuss the opportunity. Her brother Jack had been supportive throughout Emma's journey, though he sometimes felt overshadowed by his sister's accomplishments. Tonight, he spoke up with an idea that surprised everyone. What if I helped too? Jack suggested. I'm 13 now, old enough to volunteer with the program. Maybe I could work with older students, the ones who think safety training is boring kid stuff. They might listen to a teenager more than they'd listen to adults. Emma's face lit up with joy. Really? You'd want to do that? Jack shrugged, trying to appear casual, but his smile betrayed his enthusiasm. Yeah, why not? Besides, someone needs to make sure you don't let all this fame go to your head. Their parents exchanged meaningful glances. Watching their two children commit to helping others filled them with pride and hope for the future. Emma's father cleared his throat, his voice thick with emotion. You both make us incredibly proud. If you want to take on these roles, we'll support you completely. Emma's mother added, but we need to set some ground rules. School comes first, always, and if either of you ever feels overwhelmed or wants to step back, that's absolutely fine. You're still children and you deserve to enjoy your childhood. Both Emma and Jack nodded their agreement. They understood their parents' concerns, but they also felt a sense of purpose that many adults spent their whole lives searching for. They had found something meaningful to dedicate themselves to, something that made a real difference in the world. The following month, Emma attended her first official meeting as a youth ambassador at the Department of Education offices in London. She sat in a conference room with program directors, education specialists, and two other young people who had been selected as ambassadors from Scotland and Wales, the Scottish. Ambassador was a 12-year-old girl named Fiona, who had used the Safety Guardians training to help her younger brother during an asthma attack. The Welsh ambassador was an 11-year-old boy named Dylan, who had signaled for help when he witnessed a car accident and saw that the driver was trapped and injured. The three young ambassadors bonded immediately, sharing their experiences and discussing their ideas for improving the program. Emma was thrilled to meet other young people who understood what it felt like to act in an emergency and to carry the weight of knowing your actions might have saved someone's life. During the meeting, the program director asked for their input on the training materials. We've noticed that engagement drops off with older students, particularly teenagers. They often think this kind of training is beneath them or unnecessary. How can we make it more relevant to that age group? Dylan spoke up first. Show them real statistics about how many emergencies happen to people their age. Car accidents, sports injuries, mental health crises. Make it about their world, not just about helping old people, Fiona added. And let them practice the scenarios. Teenagers learn better by doing, not just by listening to lectures. Make it interactive and a bit competitive. They'll engage more if they feel challenged. Emma thought for a moment before contributing. I think we should also talk about the emotional side of helping someone. When I helped Christopher, it was scary and I felt responsible afterward, like I needed to make sure he was okay. Teenagers might feel those same emotions even more strongly. We should teach them how to process those feelings and not feel guilty if things don't turn out perfectly. The adults in the room looked at each other with expressions of surprise and admiration. These young people were offering insights that hadn't occurred to the professional educators. Emma's point about emotional processing was particularly valuable, addressing an aspect of emergency response that was often overlooked in training programs. Over the following weeks, Emma worked with the program team to develop new materials specifically designed for teenage students. Jack became her test audience, giving honest feedback about what would resonate with his peers and what felt patronizing or boring. Together, the siblings helped create a version of the Safety Guardians program that felt authentic and relevant to older students. One Saturday afternoon, Emma and Jack were invited to pilot the new teenage program at a secondary school in Leeds. They stood together in front of a classroom full of skeptical 15 and 16-year-olds who clearly thought they were too cool for safety training. Jack took the lead, speaking to his fellow teenagers in their own language. "Look, I know you think this is going to be boring. You've probably sat through 100 assemblies about stranger danger and looking both ways before crossing the street. This is different." He told them about Emma's experience at Buckingham Palace, but he framed it in a way that emphasized the detective work involved, the problem-solving, and the courage it took to stand out from the crowd. Then he shared statistics about emergencies involving teenagers, focusing on situations they could relate to: friends having adverse reactions at parties, car accidents involving young drivers, mental health crises, and sports-related injuries. Emma then demonstrated the various emergency signals and explained the reasoning behind each one. But instead of just showing the gestures, she engaged the students in discussions about when and why you might need to signal for help silently. She asked them to share scenarios where these skills might be relevant in their lives. Slowly, the students' skeptical expressions began to change. They started participating, asking questions, and even sharing their own experiences. One girl described how her friend had passed out at a concert, and how terrifying it had been because she didn't know what to do. A boy talked about witnessing his father have a seizure and feeling helpless and scared. By the end of the session, the teenagers weren't just engaged. They were invested. Several approached Emma and Jack afterward, thanking them for treating them like adults and for providing practical information they could actually use. One older student, a 16-year-old named Marcus, shook Emma's hand firmly. "I've been to loads of these safety talks," Marcus said. "They're usually rubbish, talking to us like we're babies. But this was different. You made it real. You made it matter. Thank you." As Emma and Jack left the school that afternoon, they felt exhausted but exhilarated. They had found a formula that worked, a way to reach students of all ages with information that could genuinely save lives. Emma realized that her role wasn't just about telling her story anymore. It was about empowering others to write their own stories of courage and compassion. 2 years had now passed since the incident at Buckingham Palace. Emma was 11 years old and preparing for her transition to secondary school. The Safety Guardians program had become a permanent fixture in over 2,000 schools across the UK and had begun expanding internationally. With pilot programs launching in Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, the program's success had been remarkable. Statistical analysis showed that in schools where Safety Guardians training had been implemented, emergency response times had improved significantly. Students were identifying and reporting emergencies faster, and bystander intervention had increased by over 60%. Most importantly, lives were being saved. Emma's collection of letters had grown substantially. She now had a special box in her room filled with hundreds of notes from people whose lives had been touched by the program. There were letters from parents thanking her for teaching their children skills that saved family members. There were notes from teachers describing how the program had transformed their school culture. And there were countless messages from young people sharing their own stories of noticing, caring, and acting. One letter in particular had arrived recently that moved Emma deeply. It came from a teenage girl named Sarah who lived in Manchester, not far from Emma's own home. Sarah wrote about her best friend, who had been struggling with depression and had shown signs of planning to harm herself. Thanks to the Safety Guardians training, Sarah had recognized the warning signs and had known how to signal for help discreetly, without embarrassing her friend or breaking her trust. School counselors had intervened, the friend had received professional help, and she was now recovering and doing well. Sarah's letter ended with words that captured the essence of what the program had become. "You taught me that being a good friend sometimes means being brave enough to ask for help, even when it feels scary. You saved Christopher's life at a palace, but you also saved my best friend's life in a regular school in Manchester. Thank you for showing all of us that we can be heroes in our own everyday lives." Emma read this letter to her family over dinner, her voice breaking with emotion. Her father reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "You've created something bigger than yourself, sweetheart. This program isn't just about emergency response anymore. It's about building a culture where people look after each other. As Emma prepared for secondary school, she wondered how her own educational experience would change. Would her new classmates know about her story? Would teachers treat her differently? Would she be able to balance her ambassador responsibilities with the increased academic demands of secondary school? Her concerns were addressed during a meeting with the headmaster of her new school, Mr. Rahman. He was a thoughtful man with a warm demeanor who immediately put Emma and her parents at ease. Emma, I want you to know that while we're aware of your remarkable contributions to the Safety Guardians program, our priority is ensuring you have a normal, positive secondary school experience, Mr. Rahman said. You're joining us as a student first, and we'll support your ambassador work only if it doesn't interfere with your education and well-being. He went on to explain that the school had implemented the Safety Guardians program 2 years earlier and had seen wonderful results. Your work has already made our school a safer, more caring place. But now it's time for you to benefit from that culture you helped create. Be a student. Make friends. Discover new interests. The world can wait while you grow up. Emma felt a wave of relief wash over her. She loved her ambassador work, but she also yearned for normalcy. She wanted to experience the typical challenges and joys of adolescence without constantly being defined by one heroic moment from her past. The first day of secondary, school arrived with all the usual anxieties and excitement. Emma wore her new uniform, packed her bag with fresh notebooks and pens, and joined hundreds of other nervous 11-year-olds gathering in the school hall for orientation. She was placed in a form group with students from various primary schools, most of whom didn't know her. As they went around the circle introducing themselves, Emma simply said, I'm Emma Morrison. I like reading, playing football, and I'm terrible at art. No mention of Buckingham Palace or the Safety Guardians program. Just a normal girl starting secondary school. Her form tutor, Ms. Chen, was Sophie's aunt, which made Emma smile at the small world coincidence. Ms. Chen treated Emma exactly like every other student, with kindness but without special attention or favoritism. It was exactly what Emma needed. However, word inevitably spread about who Emma was. By the end of the first week, most students in her year knew her story. But to Emma's surprise and relief, her peers didn't treat her like a celebrity. Instead, they approached her with genuine curiosity and respect, asking thoughtful questions about her experiences and about the Safety Guardians program. One girl named Amara became particularly close with Emma. Amara had moved to Manchester from Somalia 5 years earlier and had overcome significant challenges adapting to a new country and culture. She understood what it felt like to carry an identity that others found interesting or unusual. You know what I like about you? Amara said one day during lunch. You don't act like you're special. You just act normal. Like, yeah, you did this amazing thing, but you're still just Emma who can't draw to save her life and who always forgets her PE kit. Emma laughed, grateful for Amara's straightforward friendship. That's because I am just normal. I saw something, I did something. That doesn't make me different from anyone else. It just means I was in the right place at the right time with the right knowledge. As the term progressed, Emma found herself enjoying secondary school more than she had expected. She joined the school's book club, tried out for the football team, and discovered a surprising talent for science, particularly biology. Her teacher, Mr. Patel, noticed her keen interest in how the human body works and encouraged her to explore medical topics. One afternoon, Mr. Patel asked Emma to stay after class. I've been thinking about your interest in human biology and your background with the Safety Guardians program. Have you ever considered a career in medicine? You have the observational skills, the compassion, and the calm demeanor that would make you an excellent doctor or paramedic. Emma was taken aback. She had never thought that far ahead about her future career. I don't know. Isn't being a doctor really hard? You have to be really smart and study for years and years. Mr. Patel smiled. You are really smart, Emma. And yes, medical school is challenging, but it's achievable for someone with your dedication and ability. I'm not saying you have to decide. 5 years had passed since that transformative morning at Buckingham Palace. Emma was now 16 years old, studying for her examinations and preparing to apply for sixth form college. The shy 8-year-old, who had raised her hand in a crowd of thousands, had grown into a poised young woman with clear goals and unwavering determination. The Safety Guardians program had become an international phenomenon, operating in over 15 countries and reaching millions of young people. The program had evolved beyond its original scope, now including modules on mental health awareness, bystander intervention for bullying, online safety, and conflict resolution. What had begun as emergency signal training had transformed into a comprehensive approach to creating caring, aware communities. Emma had continued her role as a youth ambassador throughout secondary school. Though she had carefully balanced this responsibility with her academic pursuits, she had excelled in her sciences, particularly biology and chemistry, and was now seriously considering applying to study medicine at university. Mr. Patel's suggestion from 5 years earlier had taken root and flourished. Christopher's wedding had been one of the most joyful days of Emma's life. She had stood before the congregation in a small village church and read a passage about love and second chances, her voice clear and confident. Christopher and Rebecca had since welcomed a daughter, whom they named Emma Grace Walsh. When Emma received the birth announcement with a note saying, "Named in honor of the person who gave us our future," she had cried happy tears for hours. The original box of letters Emma had kept had multiplied into several boxes, then into a storage unit her parents had rented specifically to house the correspondence. Thousands upon thousands of letters from people around the world, sharing how the Safety Guardians program had impacted their lives. Emma tried to read every single one, though it had become nearly impossible to keep up with the volume. One letter that arrived during Emma's 16th year came from an unexpected source. It was from Martin Cooper, the paramedic who had visited her primary school all those years ago and planted the seed of knowledge that Emma had used to save Christopher's life. Martin wrote that he had been diagnosed with early onset Parkinson's disease and would be retiring from active paramedic duty. He shared how learning about Emma's actions and seeing the massive impact of the Safety Guardians program had given his career a profound sense of meaning. "I've responded to thousands of emergencies over my career," he wrote. "But the most important thing I ever did was teach a room full of 8-year-olds about emergency awareness. You've taught me that we never know which seeds we plant will grow into forests." Emma immediately wrote back thanking Martin for his service and for the lesson that had changed her life. She shared with him her plans to study medicine and how his example had inspired her to dedicate her life to helping others. They began a regular correspondence, with Martin offering guidance about navigating the healthcare field and Emma sharing updates about the program's continued expansion. At school, Emma had assembled a dedicated team of fellow students who helped coordinate Safety Guardians activities. Amara, her close friend since first year, had become the program's social media coordinator, creating engaging content that resonated with young people. Jack, now 19 and studying education at university, regularly returned to collaborate on program development, focusing on making the training more accessible and inclusive for students with disabilities and learning differences. One autumn afternoon, Emma received an unexpected phone call from the Prime Minister's office. She nearly dropped her phone in shock when the caller explained that Emma had been selected to receive a Points of Light award, recognizing outstanding individual volunteers who were making a change in their community. The award would be presented at 10 Downing Street, and the Prime Minister wanted to meet her personally. Emma's parents were overwhelmed with pride, but also protective of their daughter. "Are you sure you want to continue with all of this?" her mother asked gently. "You've given so much already. Nobody would blame you if you wanted to step back and just focus on being a teenager preparing for university." Emma considered the question seriously. There were times when she felt tired of the responsibility, when she longed for complete anonymity, when she wished she could just be a regular teenager without the weight of knowing that people looked to her as an example. But then she would remember why she had started this journey in the first place. "I saw someone who needed help and I helped him," Emma said. "That's all I've ever tried to do. If I step back now, I'm saying that my comfort is more important than continuing to help people learn how to help each other. I can't do that, not yet. Maybe someday, but not yet." The ceremony at 10 Downing Street was intimate and moving. The Prime Minister spoke about Emma's actions and their far-reaching impact, highlighting how a single moment of courage had transformed into a national movement. Emma stood beside Christopher, who had been invited to attend as her special guest, and accepted the award with grace and humility. During a private conversation after the ceremony, the Prime Minister asked Emma about her future plans. When Emma mentioned her intention to study medicine, the Prime Minister smiled warmly. "The medical field will be fortunate to have someone with your observational skills and compassion. But I hope you'll also consider how policy and public health approaches can multiply the impact of individual healthcare providers. People like you, who understand both the personal and systemic aspects of helping others, are rare and valuable. Emma left Downing Street with new ideas percolating in her mind. Perhaps medicine wasn't just about treating individual patients. Perhaps there were ways to help people on a broader scale through public health policy, emergency preparedness programs, and community health initiatives. Her path forward suddenly seemed wider and more complex than she had previously imagined. That evening, Emma sat in her room surrounded by university prospectuses, trying to make decisions about her future. Her phone buzzed with a message from Callum, the boy from Edinburgh whose grandfather she had indirectly helped save years earlier. Callum was now 15 and had become a regional coordinator for the Safety Guardians program in Scotland. His message read, "Just led my 50th training session today. Taught 200 students how to notice and care and act. Every single one of them is carrying forward what you started. This ripple effect is infinite. Thank you for showing us all how to be brave." Emma smiled, typing back a quick response. Then she opened her laptop and began drafting her university application essay. She wrote about that morning at Buckingham Palace, but not in the way most people expected. She didn't focus on the heroism or the recognition. Instead, she wrote about the power of education, the importance of paying attention, and the profound responsibility we all share to care for one another. She wrote about Martin Cooper, the paramedic who had taught a room full of children and never knew which of them would need his lessons. She wrote about Christopher, whose near tragedy had become a catalyst for change. She wrote about Callum and Sarah and Mrs. Dubois and the thousands of others whose stories had intertwined with hers, and she wrote about her own transformation from a shy little girl into someone who understood that heroism wasn't about grand gestures. It was about the daily choice to notice, to care, and to act. As Emma submitted her application to medical school, she felt a sense of peace about her journey. The shy 8-year-old at Buckingham Palace would always be a part of her story. But she was so much more than that single moment now. She was a young woman with purpose, with vision, with a deep understanding of how one person's courage could inspire thousands to find their own courage. The Safety Guardians program would continue to grow and evolve, eventually reaching millions of young people across the globe. Emma would remain involved throughout her medical training and beyond, always finding ways to contribute to the mission of creating a world where people looked after each other. She would become a doctor, then a public health specialist, and eventually a leader in emergency preparedness and community health initiatives. But on this particular evening, as the sun set over Manchester and Emma closed her laptop after submitting her university applications, she was simply a 16-year-old girl who had learned an important lesson years ago. She had learned that paying attention matters, that caring about strangers isn't weakness but strength, that education has the power to save lives, and that courage isn't the absence of fear but the decision to act despite it. Emma walked to her window and looked out at her neighborhood, at the ordinary houses on an ordinary street filled with ordinary people. But she knew now that there was no such thing as ordinary. Every person she could see, every person in every house had the capacity for extraordinary compassion and courage. They just needed to be reminded of it. They needed to be taught how to recognize when others needed help. They needed to understand that they already possessed everything necessary to be heroes in their own everyday lives. That had been the true gift of her experience at Buckingham Palace. Not the recognition or the awards or the international programs. The true gift was understanding that heroism was accessible to everyone. It didn't require special powers or special circumstances. It only required awareness, compassion, and the willingness to act. As Emma turned away from the window and began preparing for bed, she felt grateful for every twist and turn her journey had taken. She had saved Christopher's life that day at the palace, but in many ways he had saved hers too. He had given her purpose, shown her the impact that one person could have, and helped her understand her own strength. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to notice and care and act. Emma was ready for all of it. She had learned from the best teachers, a dedicated paramedic who believed in educating young people, a guard who had faced mortality with grace, and thousands of ordinary people who had proven that paying attention and caring about others could change the world. The story that had begun with a child raising her hand in a crowd at Buckingham Palace had evolved into something much larger than anyone could have predicted. It had become a movement, a philosophy, a way of being in the world. And as Emma drifted off to sleep that night, she smiled knowing that somewhere, right at this moment, another child was paying attention, another person was noticing someone in distress, another act of courage was rippling outward into the world. The legacy of that single moment would continue long after Emma was gone, touching lives that would never know her name, but would benefit from the culture of care and awareness she had helped create. And that, Emma understood, was the truest form of heroism, creating change that outlives you, planting seeds that grow into forests, inspiring others to find their own courage and compassion. The shy little girl from Manchester had shown the world something profoundly simple and profoundly important. She had shown them that everyone has the power to save a life. They just need to pay attention, care enough to act, and trust that their actions matter. And they do matter. They always matter. Every single time.